Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Hanif Qureshi, IPS. Presently I am the Commissioner of Police, Faridabad City in Haryana. We are looking at the internal security management paper, and today we are going to study underdevelopment and extremism. In this module, we shall explore whether there is a relationship between underdevelopment and extremism. Extremism has been mostly concentrated in the agrarian and tribal areas of India since the very beginning. These are also the areas which have lagged behind in the development as compared to other areas of the country. The Naxalites have sought to enlist support of the marginalized and deprived sections of the society. The underdeveloped areas of the country are also the areas which are fertile hunting ground for Naxalites, where they find it easier to attract supporters to their cause. This is also a challenge to the state in that it must pay attention to the root cause, namely underdevelopment, to remove the discontent in people so that no support is provided to these extremist elements. Let me share with you the learning objectives of this module. After completing this module, you will be able to know about the issues of underdevelopment in tribal and agrarian regions of India. You will be able to understand the causes of the Naxalite movement. You will also know how the Naxals attract the poor and marginalized sections of people into extremism. You will also be able to evaluate the efforts of the government in the state and the center to undertake development works in the Naxal affected areas. Now let us look at the relationship between underdevelopment and extremism. An analysis of the Naxal ideology would indicate that it is based on opposition to the class structure of the society. They believe that the two classes of the oppressed and the oppressors are constantly at war. The state represents the interests of the Indian feudal princes, big landlords, and capitalists, as said by Das Gupta. These people also believe that the traditional rights of forest dwellers over their lands have been usurped by the government, and these lands have been acquired and given to big multinational corporations. Drawing upon the ideology of Mao Zedong, the Naxalites believe that the government protects the interest of the landlords and moneyed classes and oppresses the rights of the ordinary people. The 7th Administrative Reforms Commission has highlighted several causes for the emergence of the Naxalite movement. These causes are land related factors, displacement and forced eviction, livelihood related causes, social exclusion, and the governance related causes. The areas which face underdevelopment are also the areas which are affected by Naxalism. If you look at the map of India and look at the underdeveloped areas, you would find that most of these areas are also affected by Naxalism. Now let us take a closer look at some of the factors affecting Naxalism. Most of the regions in which the Naxal movement has continued to flourish are also afflicted with high levels of poverty. For instance, in Telangana, the districts of Karimnagar, Adilabad and Warangal had poverty levels of 95.8%, while in the rest of the state it was between 50 and 60%. After independence, the government emphasized improved agricultural policies. These policies and plans aimed on increasing the yield of agricultural produce through better quality seeds, fertilizers and improved irrigation facilities. But adequate attention was not paid to check economic and social disparity. As the commercialization of agriculture assumed high proportions, economic disparities between people widened. The rich got richer and the poor got poorer. As the communist ideology spread, there was a greater mobilization of the marginalized sections of the society, especially lower castes and tribals, who were sharecroppers and also landless laborers. Any person who faces a loss of means of livelihood or land is entitled to get just cash compensation under the Land Acquisition Act. This suggests that land, natural resources, means of livelihood, and perhaps even social and cultural loss as a result of displacement can have a monetary value attached to it. Of course, it is well known that there are non-monetary costs also, such as human costs or ecological costs, which are associated with the loss of land. Those costs are not even acknowledged. The government does recognize the problem associated with cash compensation to a certain extent. Efforts have been made to either compensate land for land or to provide them employment in the resulting industry. But many of these measures just remained on paper. They were not actually implemented. In those areas where only compensation given is cash, the tendency to spend the compensation amount of consumer goods and becoming destitute are common. Once people get cash, they would spend it on whatever their daily needs are. And after a certain period of time, that cash is gone and the land is already gone. So the people are left in a lurch. In most of the tribal projects, the oustees from the land, they become listless wanderers without a mooring. That was stated by the Kothari Commission report in 1988. Apart from this factor, livelihood related, there are some land related factors also. Governments have enacted a variety of legislations to address important land related issues, such as introduction of land ceilings for individuals, distribution of surplus land among the landless, consolidation of land holdings, prevention of fragmentation of land, protection of rights of tenants and settlement of wastelands. But the impact of these measures at the ground level is marginal due to slow implementation and faulty implementation. This improper implementation of acts has enabled the left extremists to exploit the disappointment of the promises made to beneficiaries, and it is especially true in rural areas. Several reports suggest that at least 40% of the forced evictions in the last 60 years have been of tribal people, and mostly to build dams for the country's supply of power and irrigation, and for the so called development, where the dispossessed people, they never get a share in the fruits of development. Another factor that is the cause of the extremist uprising has been the perpetuation of the class divide between people in the Indian society. The marginalized people in backward areas, a lot of times they do not have access to a democratic forum to raise their concerns, and they need to voice their grievances. Sometimes this situation has forced them to speak the language of violence. The Constitution of India prohibits discrimination under Article 15. However, there is a need to ensure that equality provisions are effectively implemented also. They not only remain on paper, but their influence and impact is seen on the ground. One of the prominent reasons for the emergence of the Naxalite movement was the prevailing social and economic issues. For instance, a report of the West Bengal State Secretariat of the CPIM stated, behind the peasant unrest in Naxalbari lies a deep social malady, malified transfers, evictions and other anti-people actions of tea gardeners and their jotedars. Therefore, the causes of Naxalism have been several times identified as primarily socio-economic. The class struggle has also existed due to the existence of traditional practices like the zamindari system. After independence, the groups constituting the sharecroppers and the landless labourers wanted their rights to be realized, and they demanded equal status with the landowners. But the landed classes obviously wanted to retain the power and prestige that was given to them under the zamindari system. The sharecroppers and labourers, they consist of mostly the lower castes, and mostly the landowners belong to the higher caste. Therefore, there was a significant overlap between the caste and class identity, and there was not much distinction between class and caste relationships at that time. Therefore, class conflicts were actually manifested as caste conflicts. The iniquity of the caste system perpetuated the perception that higher caste function as the class and they oppress the lower class, which consists of the lower castes. Then we also look at the displacement and forced eviction. You see that the process of alienation of land of tribals has been a major factor responsible for deteriorating economic condition of these people. For example, in Srikakulam district, the Naxal movement, by the time of the uprising, only 1/3 of the tribals owned land. Now, land alienation happens due to many reasons. One of them is indebtedness, and that is a large measure because of the money lenders trap. It also occurs due to government's restrictions of access to forest land. Historically, forests have been the exclusive domain of the tribals. In implementing government regulations on forest access, government actions sometimes result in harassment of tribals, though inadvertently. Loss of access to forest produce, which was a major source of income for tribals, that had a debilitating effect on them. The other means of land alienation by state is through compulsory acquisition of land. As you know, land can be acquired by the government only for a public purpose. But what constitutes a public purpose has often been debated. Several kinds of private industry, power plants, dams and mines have been built over tribal lands by exercising the power of acquisition by the government. The main problem with this approach is the displacement of the tribals and the rural people for whom the land was a source of livelihood as well as an integral part of their lives. As a result of land alienation, the tribals not only lost their only source of livelihood, but also experienced a sense of loss and emptiness due to the disturbance in their local ecology. A large percentage of the tribal population in India owes its livelihood directly or indirectly from the forests. Most of the country's mineral resources are also to be found in the forest and tribal regions. As a result of land acquisition and development, major irrigation and power projects, mines and heavy industries have come up in the tribal regions, for instance Chota Nagpur and other areas. Several times this has led to the uprooting of tribals from their native homes. Some of them have been rehabilitated through various programs and policies of the government, but many times they have become destitute. This is due to their heavy dependence on agriculture and also, more importantly, their deep sentimental connection to their land. Even rehabilitation of tribals and other rural poor by providing them jobs in the large development projects like mining and dams, that has the negative impact on affected people. They feel a sense of loss of identity because land alienation as well as adjusting to the new employer-employee relationship is a problem for them. The role of an employee, that is in sharp contrast to the prior position where they considered themselves as masters of the forest. Now, response by the governments at the central and state levels has to be studied in this context. Several steps have been taken by the Government of India at the national level to tackle the issue of underdevelopment as it relates to Naxalism. The government's response to left-wing extremism is characterized by a holistic thinking. Holistic thinking means a thinking where a number of factors are taken into account. Not only security related steps, but also development related, society related, and the all issues we have talked about land alienation. Therefore, the government, if you look at the steps which it has taken, it acts in the areas of security, in the area of developmental works, in the area of ensuring rights of local communities, in the area of improvement in governance in the worst affected areas, and ensuring correct representation of facts by the mass media. But if we look at the federal structure of the Constitution of India, we see that law and order is a state subject. Therefore, action on the maintenance of law and order is primarily taken by the state governments. The central government, of course, closely monitors the situation and supplements and coordinates the efforts of state governments in several ways. Now, let us look at some examples of successful handling of Naxal movements by state governments. There are instances where state government has not only correctly identified the causes of Naxal movements, but also initiated steps to contain it and bring the situation back to normalcy. Some of the measures adopted by state governments are, let us look at one or two. Let us look at the case of West Bengal. You know that the first Naxal movement started from the village Naxalbari. After that incident, the government of West Bengal initiated a number of pro-poor measures in the Naxal affected districts. For instance, they started what is called the CADP, or the Comprehensive Area Development Program. This was meant to supply inputs and credit to farmers, especially small farmers. The government realized that it is difficult for the small farmers to market their produce. Therefore, the government also took up marketing on the behalf of the small farmers. The worst affected areas of Naxalbari and Devra, they were selected for implementation of these and similar other schemes. After the formation of the left front government in 1977 in West Bengal, Operation Barga was started. This scheme was meant to ensure the rights of the sharecroppers. A number of other measures were also taken simultaneously by the government. One such step was the significant increase in the minimum wages. This benefited a large number of the rural poor. And as a result, the people who benefited from these government programs, they began to distance themselves from the Naxalism movement. The success of these programs and the process initiated by the state signaled the beginning of end of Naxalism in these areas. And today we see that the state of West Bengal is almost free from any Naxal movement. Let us look at Andhra and Orissa now. Similar measures which we just recently talked about, which were aimed at ameliorating the poor conditions of backward people, they were started in other parts of the country affected by extremism. For instance, in Srikakulam district in Andhra Pradesh and Ganjam district in Odisha, the governments worked to find out some kind of a solution to the problem of rural debt. Schemes were developed to ensure that the debts which were incurred by the tribal poor, they were either cancelled or they were converted to loans from banks and other sources, and there were efforts made to improve the income which involved agriculture, and also the agriculture was sought to be made more profit oriented. Of course, Naxalism continues to thrive in many areas of the states today, including Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha and some parts of Maharashtra also. Now, let us look at the approach of the Government of India. The Government of India has taken several steps and launched several schemes for the development of the areas affected by left wing extremism. Let us look at some of these schemes. The first scheme which I would like to mention is the Special Infrastructure Scheme, or the SIS. The SIS scheme was started from the financial year 2008 with an outlay of rupees 500 crores to cater to the critical infrastructure gaps of security forces, which could not be covered under any other scheme. One component of the scheme was meant for meeting out the objects related to requirements of mobility of the security forces, so that they can travel easily by upgrading roads in inaccessible areas, especially forest and tribal areas. So, the movement of the forces became easier. Another scheme which I would like to mention is the Integrated Action Plan or the additional central assistance for especially the LWE affected districts. The Planning Commission had initiated the Integrated Action Plan in 2010, which covered 60 tribal and backward districts. This was meant to fulfill the development needs of the area by providing services and infrastructure. From 2012, this scheme was renamed as Additional Central Assistance for LWE affected districts. Now this scheme covers 88 districts, most of them which are affected by extremism. And the focus of this scheme includes construction of school buildings, provision of school furniture, providing Anganwadi centers, drinking water facilities, rural roads, godowns, PDS shops, livelihood activities, skill development, minor irrigation, health center and a number of such facilities. Therefore, you can see that the provision of lots of developmental works which relate to education and health have been included in the scheme. The other plan started by the Government of India is the Road Requirement Plan or the RRP. This scheme was implemented by the Ministry of Rural Transport of Ministry of Road Transport and Highways in 2009 for improvement of road conditions in the Naxal affected districts. And the scheme covered Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha and Uttar Pradesh. Under this scheme, thousands of kilometers of roads have been constructed in the Naxal affected districts. These are the districts which were inaccessible earlier in some parts. The connectivity has now improved considerably in the areas provided by this plan. Let me tell you about another innovative scheme of the Government of India, and that is the installation of mobile towers. Now, as you know, it has been seen that the communication network is very poor in the areas affected by extremism. The means of communication are so inadequate that people are forced to live in isolated conditions. The private players are obviously hesitant to put up their mobile towers because of the economic viability issues. Therefore, the Government of India decided to put up mobile towers on its own, and the government decided, that was in 2014, that nearly 2,200 locations were identified in consultation with the Home Ministry and BSNL and also the state government in the 10 left-wing extremism affected states. And mobile towers have been slowly put out on all these locations. And today the situation is that communication between the people of the area amongst themselves and also for the security forces has been improved vastly. Another program which has been launched by the Government of India, which is showing results, is the Civic Action Program. This scheme was started from 2010 in the LWE affected areas. Under this scheme, funds were provided to CRPF, BSF and ITBP, also SSP, that was meant to do welfare activities in the deployment areas. This scheme proved to be very successful in bridging the gap between the security forces and local population and also for winning the hearts and minds of the population. Funds more than rupees 17 crores were released to the Central Armed Police Forces during the financial year 2014-15 and 2015-16, and this amount of funds has been increasing every year. About 18 to 19 crore rupees are being released to the paramilitary forces for creating various types of welfare programs which are meant to benefit the local population. There is also a scheme of GIS mapping. GIS, as you know, is the Geographical Information Systems. The government has implemented a software technology based GIS mapping of the essential services in the 35 most affected LWE districts. The GIS, it's a technology that can collect, integrate, edit, analyze and display geographical information. Using the GIS tools, Users can search, query, or display information. It's basically a modern version of the paper maps which were used traditionally. Today, efforts are on to completely map not only the geographical features which were found in traditional maps found in atlases, but also we are mapping financial services, schools, post offices, health facilities, mobile towers, PDS services, roads, security features, and a number of other features which are available actually on the land. This resulting GIS database will assist in locating deficiencies in infrastructure, civic planning, and developmental works. For instance, once you have all the wells mapped, you can know the area where rainy wells are not provided. Once you have all the roads mapped, then you know that which is the area which is lacking in roads, and developmental efforts can focus in that area. Once fully developed, GIS can also enable monitoring of the projects and can help in their timely construction. So, you can know that what proportion of a bridge has been constructed, whether the timeline is being adhered to or not, is it slow or is it fast. Considering these benefits, it is expected that GIS mapping will help all stakeholders, including citizens and the government, to take informed decisions based on these issues of governance in the Naxal affected areas. The Government of India has maintained a policy of integrated action, and it focuses on the development of security related interventions so that the problem of Naxalism can be successfully tackled. Now, if we look at the relationship between growth and violence, growth as in the growth rate of the economy, we will see that as the growth rate of the Indian economy picked up, the fatalities due to terrorist violence experienced a declining trend. But the philosophy of most Maoist, Communist, and other related groups indulging in violence is based on the notion of overthrowing the democratically elected government. The Naxals do not want root causes like underdevelopment to be addressed in a meaningful manner. It is obvious because they resort to targeting school buildings, roads, railway bridges, health infrastructure, communication facilities, etc. in a major way. Their actions are likely to keep the population in their areas of influence marginalized. The process of development has received setbacks through these actions in many parts of the country. There is a need to recognize the ideology and plan of the Naxals by the civil society as well as by the media, so that pressure can be built on them to shun violence and join the mainstream. Now, let us look at the summary of this module we have covered so far. In this module, we saw that often there is a connection between the development of a region and the existence of extremism in those regions. The regions of India where extremism has flourished are also the regions which have lagged behind in development. This module explored the reasons for the spread of extremism in the context of development or rather underdevelopment of an area. These reasons are livelihood related factors, land related factors, social exclusion, displacements and forced evictions. A section of the people influenced by the philosophy of Mao Zedong have adopted the principle of violence to wage a war against the state. They are against the form of government which is parliamentary democracy in India. To overthrow the government, they resort to killings, threats and other violent activities. They also try to disrupt the developmental works such as roads, communication networks, bridges, school buildings and health infrastructure. The government has taken a holistic approach to deal with the issue of underdevelopment and the Naxal threat. They focus on both the development aspects as well as the security related interventions. So, in this module we have discussed not only about the developmental related activities, but also about security related activities. Police and law and order are state subjects. Therefore, the state governments deal with them at a local level. The Government of India assists them through funding as well as providing manpower. As far as the development initiatives are concerned, the government has initiated special plans and programs for the Naxal affected states in general and affected districts in particular. Several schemes have been mentioned in the module, such as Special Infrastructure Scheme or SIS, Integrated Action Plan, Additional Central Assistance, Road Requirement Plan, Installation of Mobile Towers, Civic Action Plan and GIS mapping. These plans are currently in operation for the benefit of the affected areas. Thank you for watching.